And so, mm, mm, there is a rebellion of love happening. Mm. Love itself is the rebellion, right? Love itself is the rebellion that says no to fear, that says no to being pulled into the stories of separation, says no to being manipulated, says no to fear. The rebellion of peace, of love itself, that we start to move as love, resonating as love. And we start to shift the old ways, the old ideas, the old concepts, that to get anywhere, we have to move in fear, as fear. That we have to move in ways that are not kind, not compassionate. That we have to move in ways that are, in a way, violent to the preciousness of the love that we are. That it's not about breaking down, breaking in. It's not about moving in these ways that have been established in the great imbalance, but in the greater opening and recognition of who we are in truth, what we are as love. We start to move as this love, and we move in this sharing, caring, loving naturalness, an all-inclusive recognition that you are only ever meeting yourself. And why would you interact with yourself in any other way than as absolute open love? These ideas of annihilating the ego, these ideas of getting rid of, all part of the old paradigm. The rebellion of love says you already are, and it is just about illuminating all of the ways that you think you are not. But it's not about fighting with some idea of an ego that is bad, in the way, or wrong. It is about welcoming what gets called ego as protective patterns that, when met in the presence of love and held, illuminated, these patterns drop away, they soften into the remembrance of the one love. That we don't have to move in ways of force. We don't have to assert ourselves in any way, and we don't have to be downtrodden and kicked around, right? We don't have to imagine that in order to fit in or to get to the remembrance of this truth, that we have to buy into ideas. That any kind of mistreatment or unkindness is necessary. It's not. It's just not. And this is the rebellion of love. The revolution of love. The revolution that love is staying true to who you are and resonating at this fine frequency, and knowing that resonating at the fine frequency, everything surrenders, everything gets illuminated and cleared in the presence of this fine frequency of love. That your heart knows when things are aligned. Your heart knows when things are okay. And your heart knows when things feel off and not really aligned for you. And this is where there is such an importance to listen to the truth of the heart. That the intuitive knowing is the knowing of yourself, and the courage, let's say, to live this knowing, to truly live this knowing, that you don't have to believe anything, anyone, anywhere. This life is not about believing. This life is about living as yourself, remembering who you are as love. And living as this love is about living as yourself, and life feels like you. Life feels joyful, happy. It feels true. It feels enlivening, creative, inspiring, enriching, because you are aligned and the laws of nature are flowing in their naturalness. To live as yourself, to live in freedom, is to live in freedom from the mind that second guesses and questions and doubts, because there is this sense of needing to conform and fit in and be seen and get permission. But the deeper truth is to follow the intuitive knowing. Really, this is to allow true movement to happen. But how we respond to love, to the presence of love, is the natural mechanical process of everything letting go of the patterns of limitation in the presence of a resonance that is all encompassing, all accepting, holding. We recognize this, we know this, because we are this. And so this rebellion of love, it is to rebel against the ideas that your mind tells you about the ways that you have to live and be, the way that things just are, because it's not true. We have learned to conform, and we have learned to live within needs met structures and not to be living the fullness of what we are. That there can be so many misunderstandings and conceptual ideas of what this truth is, because the mind creates ways of understanding something that cannot be understood. But in truth, free of the mind, you are yourself. So we let go of spiritual ideas of how we should be, what you should say, what you shouldn't say, and you just live this freedom. You're free to express, you're free to feel, you're free to be yourself, you're free to be uniquely as you are. Free to be the love that you are. Yes, what we are is the wide open spaciousness, not a thing, not a someone, not a me, not a mind, not a life. We are the pure, essential awareness, the pure being that just is, ever free, ever open, ever clear in the knowing of itself. And as this knowing roots in the resonance of remembrance, the flow of life starts to be a reflection of this remembrance of wholeness. And so as long as this human life is being lived out, as long as there is a body, then we are a living expression, living embodiment, we could say, of the deepest knowing, the finest frequency that has been recognized. It's an adventure. To be love and to love. To allow the flow of love to naturally flow. And to know that we have the capacity to be so saturated with this love, to really be nourished at the deepest level by this love, this bliss, this nectarine flow of bliss, this nectarine flow of the essence of love that we are, is to be so deeply nourished. And the more deeply nourished that we are, the more we start to shine the radiance of true nature. We start to shine as the radiance, and we start to radiate that radiance, bringing it to the surface of life, bringing the divine, the remembrance of divine purity right to the surface of life, so that it can impact the whole collective, so that we can know the truth of who we are, live this truth, and be a vehicle of service, bringing this light to the surface of life, and loving as a way of being, loving as a way of being, sharing and caring as a natural way of being, the natural emanation of being yourself. A willingness to collapse all the ideas of who you think you are, all the sense of identity, all the things you think you know, all the things that make you a good person, all the things that make you a bad person. A willingness to be so present here now and allow there to be a complete collapse of all of the ideas, all of the systems, all of the strategies, and to be absolutely rebirthed in this moment as yourself, but not to hold on that every moment, this now, who are you now? What are you now? What is happening now? To let go of ideas about learning to be, establishing yourself. How are you seen? What role do you play in your family, your relationship, your community? To let go of it all. To let go of all of the ways of holding on to the conditioned ideas, and to be so fully free to be yourself right now, that anything can happen. You can go anywhere. You're not attached, that you're absolutely free to be the true intuitive movement of love. And you're not confined or restrained by, oh, but I have to, oh, but what about this? That you're absolutely free as a force of love, a force of life, to live, truly live, not being exist like a restrictive, restrained existence, confined and limited, that everything is conspiring to bring us to freedom. The willingness to not be attached to anything, to let it all go right now. And then find out, who are you? right now? What is alive right now? What is true and real right now? When you're not hanging on to threads attached to past and memory and identity that is rooted in a past idea of who you are as a someone, but who you are, your identity, is only rooted in the presence of now. That you are rooted only in the wild openness of your heart that is connected to the source of all, that knows its purity, that you know your purity. You know the divinity that is the pure, wide open light of being. You know this. The willingness to let it all be new, fresh, alive. What do you notice? What is stirring? What is alive? Does that feel exciting or does that feel terrifying? Just to notice. Just to feel alive, enlivened, that you are not a stagnant pool of water. You are a fresh, flowing aliveness, flowing in the knowing of yourself. At this moment, there is a willingness to collapse everything into the absolute not knowing, to collapse everything into now. To let this rebellion of love be so full and rich. No attachments to the past, no attachments to ideas and concepts about who you are or who you need to be. No attachments to who you are or who you imagine that you need to be. To just be so free here now, to truly be yourself. That to be yourself is to be free of mind. That the mind is the protection, the restriction, and that you are not the story that you have believed about yourself. You are so wide open and free and natural in truth. And everything that plays as challenge, everything that plays as resistance, everything that appears on the screen that stirs your heart, it's all a play and it's moving to bring forward the old stresses. It's moving to bring forward the patterns of limitation that can create the beliefs of who you are and not the reality of who you are, in order to dismantle all of the sense of limitation into the remembrance of being the unlimited. Your power, your true power, comes from you knowing who you are, from you being absolutely rooted, plugged in to the power source, the purity, the divinity, the knowing of what you are at its source, at the source. Your power comes from your knowing who you are. that you do not need to plug into anyone or anything in order to know yourself. Now, there are frequencies and resonances that are here to support you, and recognizing those is to receive the nourishment, the bridge, the support, the love, right? Because love loves love. And there is a bringing forward of everything that is needed, but everything is pointing you to your own power, your own knowing, and that you are fully equipped with the ability to be rooted and resting in the being, to recognize the source of all that you are is purity, is light, is love, is a wide open, infinite, eternal field. That you are always this, you are never not this, and everything is pointing in this direction. And this is where your knowing knows what is true. Your knowing is the knowing. It is pure knowledge. It is the self knowing itself. Pure knowledge, pure intelligence, consciousness, consciously awake to itself. The knowing is here. You already are. Let's talk about resistance. Okay. So resistance. Everyone finds that resistance arises. Resistance is a protection. Resistance is a learned protection. It's a learned way of imagining that we are keeping ourselves safe. But it is a limited idea of safety. And it is a protection that keeps us in a false sense of safety and feeling contained. Now, the me can feel safe in resistance, but it's also very clear that you don't feel free, open, happy, joyful, delighted in resistance. And so when we speak about welcoming resistance, being open to resistance, there's nothing to do, nothing to do. And it's definitely not to allow any kind of interceptor of the mind to come in and judge resistance or try to break through resistance. Resistance will drop its protection when met in the presence of love. So we see resistance. We welcome resistance. We welcome resistance so deeply that we come to an intimacy with resistance. It might feel like, I feel resistance, I feel contraction. I see resistance, I see that there's contraction. You don't need to try to work it out, but just to come so close, feel the sensations, feel the subtle sensations, the nervous system, and just be so present with whatever is happening. Be so open to everything that is here, so open to everything that is here, that resistance doesn't have anything to resist anymore. Because when everything is welcome, including resistance, there's nothing for resistance to resist. There's no defense needed. When the presence of this moment is just so wide open, resistance naturally just drops away. we might ask, what does this place want to express? What is this place bringing forward as a message? What are the feelings that are underneath resistance? Are we willing to feel the resistance and to go deeper into feeling what is underneath the resistance? Often what we will find is some kind of grief or sadness or anger, some kind of hurt or stress. Can we come underneath resistance and allow, welcome, whatever feelings are trying to surface? But not to get lost in these ideas. These invitations are just to have an awareness that when resistance is present, that you know how to be with resistance, that it's very natural to be open with resistance, but the learned way has been to resist resistance, to not want it to be here, to want it to change because you want to feel better, different, happy, uncontracted, free. But the only way to really allow resistance to let go is to be so welcoming, welcoming of the voice too that wants to resist it. The layers to resistance will only drop when there is an open welcoming of the sensations, the stresses, and to know that there is an intelligence that is moving so that deeper feelings can be felt and deeper entanglements can be released and let go of, that the sense of being limited and personal can fall away into the impersonal, unlimited. But we have to allow the feelings. We recognize they feel personal. They're not personal, but they feel to be so. And so we so gently, kindly allow it all. This is love's rebellion. We don't just push it away. We don't try to pretend it's not there. We don't transcend to get away from it. We actually walk towards it. We keep moving towards anything and everything. We walk right into the subtle aliveness of the nervous system, and we come to an intimacy with all that is here, welcoming, opening, and really being so natural in our way. The loving, the caring, the sharing, just allowing it all. That when we push or bring any kind of unkindness, right? So the voice of the mean one, the unkind one, the critical one that can come in, none of these places will let go in the presence of the unkindness, of the criticism. And yet we are, of course, being invited to illuminate and welcome the one that wants to criticize, the one that wants to doubt, the one that wants to be unkind, the one that feels that that is necessary. Because so much of our struggle is with our own inner voices, our own inner story and the inner dialogue. And when we really come to this moment here now, and we can be aware of that inner dialogue, but not listen to it, not believe it, not in a way that keeps us divided and in allegiance with fear, but when we come to the felt sense of being the being and the wide openness, the love that we are, we can listen and welcome these places from a wholeness that loves and cares, and welcome all of the voices. The whole functioning is seen to be intelligence. The whole flow of life is intelligence. So then this willingness to just allow everything to collapse, complete letting go, not holding on to ideas, not holding on to concepts, not holding on to memory and past, and not needing external validation or seeming permission to be yourself. That your knowing knows, and your greatest service to the whole is to be yourself, to be uniquely just as you are. As we open to recognize this rebellion that love is, that love says no way to fear. Love says no way to the belief in separation. Not as a way of resisting, but as a no way. Does not exist, does not exist in reality. That love's no way is really rooted in the knowing of what is true. That love knows only love. And its rebellion is this rooted remaining in the frequency of love in the face of anything and everything that wants to ask you to move in unconscious ways. Now we can be so surprisingly entangled in unconscious ways of moving. Every day, all day, there can be so much that is unconscious that there's just a sense of, well, this is just the way that things are, this is the way that I move. But the deeper that we come into this remembrance and love's rebellion, we start to question everything. Like, what is that? Like, why did I say that? What do I really mean? Wow, is that manipulative? Is that kind? Is that true? Right? We start to question everything. Why am I saying yes to that when my heart says no? Where am I moving from? Why didn't I say what I truly felt? That we actually start to really question everything. When we can feel anything is a little off, that we start questioning. What's really going on here? What is the opportunity here? Wow, yes, that is an unconscious protected place. Illuminate it. Wow, that little voice that just popped up. Who are you? What are you talking about? You shine the light, right? There's no unkindness. There's no unkindness. There's no judgment. There's no criticism. There's a radiant smiling at the sweetness, a curiosity. Wow, there are these places that actually believe that move like that. It's this opportunity to really start to see how much we move from protection and how we collaborate with fear. And in this rebellion of love, that we are being invited to truly remember the love that we are and to shine right on the surface of life, to be the vehicles that bring this light to the surface of life, that bring this radiance, that bring the frequency of purity right to the surface of life, the frequency of divinity right to the surface of life. And that all of our functioning is an opportunity to refine and refine. Now, it doesn't mean that if we still have residues and conditionings and stuff playing out, that we're not also being a vehicle, a force of love. We are, but we can get stronger in that. We can get deeper. We can shine more. We can refine and refine and refine. So it's not that anything is wrong, and it's not that anything wrong is happening when we're seeing the patternings or we're finding resistance. Nothing wrong in any of it. It's all an opportunity, a place that feels like it is empty of the remembrance of love is just waiting to be filled with the light and remembrance of love, right? So be the beacon for love's remembrance to dawn, to shine its radiance in every single corner, crevice, every cell, every fiber of your being and life. Allow this love, this light to penetrate everything more fully. Now, all of life, everything that's happening is the natural flow of life itself. It already is an intelligence, a resonant light flow. But the more that we are attuned in our functioning with the knowing of this, and we're not imagining that we're divided from this, then the whole unfolding of life becomes so much more gentle and kind and smooth. But as this is in process, we will hit bumpy patches, right? We will hit bumpy patches. It's absolutely normal that we hit these bumpy places so that refinement can happen, purification can happen. Purification is the unwinding of patterns of limitation into the remembrance of the unlimited, so that the radiant light of the divine heart can shine right here on the surface of life. It is so profound what is happening. It is so profound. And what is really important is that in the remembrance of the power of who you are, that you have the ability to know yourself and feel rooted in yourself in a way where you feel the power, that you don't feel like you need anything from the external. Now, that isn't to say that we don't join in companionship and that we don't come into the remembrance together, because this is incredibly potent and incredibly powerful. But what's so important is that you feel clear and alive, rooted, true, real. You feel like yourself. You don't feel like anyone else, right? You're not trying to be like me, and you're not trying to be like anyone else that maybe inspires you or also supports or guides you. It's not about taking on anyone else's persona or trying to be like or imagining that you should be like. It's about feeling like yourself, being yourself so fully, because what I need, we could say, is for you to be yourself. What we all need is for all beings to truly be themselves. Now, of course, we're not speaking about individuals. We're speaking about freedom, the freedom to be. What wholeness needs is for all beings to be free to be, not playing out stories of limitation and identities. Now, when we say what wholeness needs, of course, we're playing with words. Wholeness doesn't really need that, because wholeness already knows it's wholeness. It knows that everything belongs. It is the all-encompassing principle of integrity, right? It is divinity, purity, innocence. But the movement that is the human experience is a process, an evolutionary process that is all about you being yourself, you coming to the true identity in order for what is happening here in this human realm, which is essentially a field of consciousness that is in the process of refinement and purification. The mission of this is to bring this consciousness to a finer frequency, an unlimited frequency, a remembrance of the fine frequency of love. This is where it has the capacity to change the way the human life is lived. Now, as we refine, we are being asked to completely let go of life as we know it. We're being asked to let go, but not in a way that the mind might think. We're being asked within our direct experience to be true, to be clear, to be aligned in the remembrance of love, and to not cling on to any ideas, any wantings, but to be so free for this frequency to really shift everything, let's say on the surface of life. Now, when we're speaking of the surface of life, what we're speaking of is a frequency of living. Now, living in the idea of separation, in fear, in the human realm, is like a frequency of living. There's finer frequencies of living. When we come to recognize that I'm not the person, that I'm the unbounded, we shift the frequency of living, and we keep refining and refining, and we can be living multi-frequency, multi-dimensionally, but essentially we're only ever the finest frequency that we have opened to. And the finer the frequency, we can operate at the denser frequencies, right? So the frequency of what you are, the resonance of what you are, which is essentially your nervous system. You are your nervous system. Your nervous system is consciousness. Your nervous system is precious, precious. It's everything. Taking care of your nervous system, refining your nervous system is everything in this unfolding. So that is why we want to keep allowing the purifications and the releasing of stress, because stress being held in the nervous system is holding us in patterns of limitation. Resistance are those patterns of limitation trying to hold tight to a denser frequency. But what's happening in our gatherings is that the frequency that we are meeting at is more refined and is refining the nervous systems. It's refining the consciousness. It's like flowing to refine everything. It's bringing in the frequency, the bliss frequency. It's bringing in the frequency of wholeness. And there can be an attuning with this. It's not in the seen or the understandable, because it's intelligence. So it's about attuning, aligning with the frequency, and you start to feel more yourself. You start to feel more stillness, more silence, more openness, more peace. And you also start to feel more of the alive flow of who you are. The remembrance, the flow of remembrance. The frequency of remembrance is the frequency of light. So, many of you will recall that I used to speak about light transmissions. Now, the light transmissions go on, but we just don't point and speak about it in the same way. Because we don't need to. Because the refinement and the light and the way that that light is alive in the nervous systems of everyone is constantly refining by itself now, because it's an intelligence, right? So we used to speak of meeting in the silence, and that light transmissions would be happening, really to bring attention to your light, your ability to perceive the light. The light is always here. The light is always, we could say, in transmission. And the more that refinement is happening in the nervous systems, and that we are resonating at the frequency of remembrance, the more of that light is being transmitted, right? So this is where we speak about those reverberations going out and affecting the whole. Because the radiance of what you are, the radiant shining wholeness that you are, starts to be the frequency that you're living at. And that starts to purify your environment, starts to move out and support the whole. So just noticing the stillness, the silence, the presence of being. Just the felt sense of being here. So much in this unfolding that acts as an obscuration can be these ideas of that something should happen, and how you should be, and how you should feel, and what it is to be awake, and what that looks like. And then what comes in are these ideas. There's the concepts about it, and then these ideas come in that say, well, I'm not that, and I haven't got that, and that's not my experience. And it's all a dance of concept and resistance, concept and resistance. There can be a sense of, how is it possible that I have been exposed to this kind of sharing, this kind of truth, the resonance of truth for so long? And the mind says, but I don't feel like I have it. I don't feel like I know it. I don't feel. But that's because there's a concept been created of what you should be getting and how you should be feeling, that is acting as an obscuration to actually just being yourself right now. That there's a simplicity to being yourself. Now, built into a lot of spirituality is, okay, it's built in as a frequency. It can be unconscious on a certain level, but what can be built in is a sharing of this truth, but actually not, okay, how do we say this? So there can be a sharing of this truth, but the frequency doesn't actually have the ability to shift anything. So let's say attuning to that frequency feels familiar, but it's still holding. It's not a fine enough frequency. It's a frequency that holds a certain truth. It's a partial truth. You can feel the resonance and you feel drawn to it, but it's not taking you to the fine enough frequency to recognize and remember yourself. In a way, it's a kind of a disempowering frequency, because it's sort of laying it all out, but it's laying it all out in a way that you believe that you need someone else to give you something, or that you're dependent upon someone, or someone else has something that you don't have. Now, this is, of course, being created out of your own consciousness in that way. It's a reflection of limitation, but there can be a getting stuck in these kind of concepts, and we have to come to a finer frequency of remembrance where we are fully in the knowing that we have the power in this moment to remember, and that we're not in some kind of delusional idea of trying to achieve something that is actually not achievable. Now, this is part of the delusion of spirituality, is there can be a whole lot of talking, a whole lot of hot air about something that is actually not achievable, because we're trying to achieve a concept of perfection. We're not actually realizing that perfection is now. Wholeness is now. You already are. So what we're speaking of here is very subtle. And the speaking of it and the subtlety of it isn't about understanding anything. It is about an attunement happening, a refinement happening in the flow of consciousness, like a retuning, a rewiring of these holding concepts. Some of these kind of concepts are about trying to achieve a perfection in our humanness that is not really achievable. They can have a harshness to them, and they can ask us to move in ways that are not always kind, and ask us to push ourselves into certain ways of practicing to kind of break the ego. But this is where we're speaking of love's rebellion. We're speaking of the way of love. We're speaking that things have changed, and the old ways that might have worked and been useful and profound at certain times are not necessarily the ways that we need to be moving now. The ways that we need to be moving now are in the remembrance of love, not about breaking down, breaking in, annihilating. We have enough capacity now to illuminate that all the ideas of what we might think we need to annihilate actually can be keeping us bound and protected, that it's in the presence of love and kindness that these places of protection and resistance naturally shift. So what we're speaking of is this revolution of love that is about loving all of yourself, about loving this moment, about just loving, being this loving presence here now. This is to be yourself here now. It is to make an allegiance with love, make an allegiance with this presence here now, and to not continue the allegiance with any ideas of the mind, particularly ones that are harsh, violent, and forceful, and are pushing these ideas of how you have to be and how hard it has to be, or that it has to be hard and it has to be, you know, it's like these ideas of like breaking in horses, you know, breaking their spirit, or beings that go into the forces. It's about breaking them down, breaking their spirit, making them like machines, you know, so that they're not connected to source, they're not connected to love. So they become machines of war, right? So that they have this ability to not care, to not feel that connection. But of course, nobody ever is fully emptied of that. Every being still belongs to that. And so what we're speaking of is how we have been handed these protections and conditionings in our young lives by beings that have been handed these conditionings. And we are being invited in Love's Rebellion to break the patternings and the beliefs that it has to be this way, that it has to be punishing, that it has to feel hard, that violation is an unkindness is okay. We're in this place now where we're able to be so embodied in and radiant in the remembrance of love that we realize that we don't want to perpetuate and continue any of this. And we have to allow that to be released from our nervous systems. We have to be willing to release the stresses and traumas from our nervous system, our needs met structures, our beliefs that we are wrong, bad. And we actually just want to come into a sense of being so kind, compassionate, and loving with all of ourselves. Now, as we open in the ways that we are opening, we can start to feel often love and compassion for our companions before we feel a real depth of love and compassion for ourselves. But where the shifting really happens is where that love and compassion for all that we are really starts to open, so that we can really remember the innocence before we started to believe that we were broken and wounded, bad, deficient, lacking, right? So this is what is in process. This is what is moving in this rebellion of love. That love itself, it's a rebel. It's a rebel in a world where we have learned not to give value to the preciousness of love, where we have forgotten about giving value to openness, to the remembrance of oneness, to being love, to resolving the stresses and battles inside. In a way, what keeps us in separation are the frequencies of that we might call the traumas. The frequencies of traumas are what keep us in separation. So wherever there is still traumas, there will be these residues that keep pulling the attention towards resistance and a sense of lack, a sense of woundedness, brokenness, unworthiness. And so in our unfolding, yes, the presence of being and the stillness and the silence is important. It's everything. It is, no question. Because the remembrance of this is how we can hold a pure resonance to allow essentially the patternings of limitation to unfold. We need the depth of clarity of being and the fine frequency of remembrance. And we also need the courage to go deep and allow everything that arises that tries to resist to be welcomed and loved and held. In a way, every time that we shift something within our own functioning and we release stress from the nervous system, it is a releasing of a stress within the whole, right? This is why whatever we are moving through and resolving in our nervous systems is supporting the whole. The greatest support of the whole is to be allowing the flow of nectarine bliss to be flowing through your system. Because as the nectarine bliss, the remembrance of love, the frequency of the remembrance of the being, now just in the remembrance of the being, the presence here now, the bliss flows in the nervous system, the love flows. And this flow, this nectarine nourishing flow it's flowing. It's like its flow is resonant light. It's intelligence. Intelligence is light. And as it's flowing, it's like generating a finer frequency. It's kind of like a, what would we say? It's kind of like an electrical kind of reaction. Sorry, I'm shaking the camera. But that friction, that flow, that electrical reaction of the flow, the light, it's self-generating. It refines the frequency of the nervous system. It allows stress to release. And when that stress is releasing, it will feel like a purification. It will feel a little duller. It will feel like emotion. It will feel like things are moving because it's refining and releasing the stresses in the nervous system, clearing away the density and allowing more of the fineness, more of the true nourishing frequency to flow. So this is what is happening. So as we are speaking of this, it's happening now in real time. The speaking is it happening. Nothing that needs to be done. Just in the gathering, this happens. Just in being here. So nothing needs to happen. You don't need to show up in any particular way. You don't need to achieve anything. You don't need to get anything. It's all happening. It's all happening. We can let go of all of these ideas and concepts about how you should be, what should happen, how you should be feeling. Because the more that you are yourself, the more you're going to feel yourself naturally. When you're not trying to be something else, right? This sounds so obvious on a certain level, that when you're not trying to be an idea of who you think you should be according to something that you've heard or read or some kind of teachings, when you're not trying to be that, who are you? When you're not trying to be a conceptual idea of what it is to be awakened, awakening, enlightened, opening, free, when you're not trying to be any conceptual idea of any of this, and you just drop it all. Who are you? Who are you in truth in this moment? Who are you without all those ideas? You see, you start to feel like yourself. You start to feel a deep relaxation into just being. The softness and naturalness. You start to be more naturally aware of the silence, the stillness, the presence that just is. You don't have to do anything to be yourself. It's just about us together in all of the ways that we do, allowing the obscurations to be illuminated. So there can be a letting go of the burden of the ideas of who you think you should be, how you imagine that you need to show up, what your needs met structure tells you is safe, how the residues of trauma and wounding and conditionings that you have learned and taken on are still holding in patterns. All of this is welcome. You don't need to do anything because it undoes itself. And now let us just say here, the undoing of itself also can look like certain kinds of support coming in, right? It's not that you just sit on the sofa, but maybe, because truly in the presence, everything will unwind. But some of us need a little extra support. And if extra support is needed, and that is what the intelligence ordains, let's say, it will come in, it will arrive. It's not to say that all of the ways and the movements and the flows of life don't offer so much beauty, support, inspiration, enlivenment, right? But it's to be in collaboration with love in that, and not so much in collaboration with fear, right? To really be able to feel in your system, is that a movement out of fear? Or is this an inspiring, enlivened a movement out of love? You start to discern. If I say yes to that, is that because I'm afraid or because I feel like I have to or I should? Do I have some kind of expectations? Am I giving power away in that? Or is this just like a real natural pull? Right? So you start just to notice more subtly in your functioning. Because the more that you're moving from true intuition and naturalness, the more you feel like yourself, the more free you feel, because you're embodying the freedom. You're not moving from the mind and the conditioning and these ideas, these burdensome ideas of who you need to be for anyone. You don't need to show up in all of the ways that you imagine that you need to in certain roles. Let those ways of showing up shift themselves. Show up as love. Show up as love. No one will be upset if you stop showing up as the mother, the father, the son, the daughter, the offspring, that, the sister, the brother, whatever it is, the auntie, the uncle, the compassionate carer, guardian. If you let go of all of the definitions, the husband, the wife, the partner, if you let go of all of the definitions and all of your attachments to all of these conventional ideas, and you just show up as love. You just show up as love that loves. You don't need anything. You don't need anything from anyone. You don't need to play in convention. You know yourself as love. You show up as love. You can let go of needing to constrain yourself in the ideas of how you need to show up. You show up right now as yourself. As yourself. Open, free, joyful, happy, naturally, right? Not dependent upon anything. You show up as love. You start to realize there's nothing more natural, more simple than being yourself. Nothing more natural than being yourself. Nothing more natural than being the love that you are and being a joyful rebel that loves rebellion, penetrate all areas of the life. You know, in truth, you are here alone. We speak about companions and all of these things that are in appearance on the surface of life, but in truth, you are here alone. You're creating it all. You are here alone. And to love yourself, to be this love for yourself, is to be this radiance. And then how you shine on the surface of life is just as this radiance. Being willing to let everything collapse, to not know how it is, to not know, to not be today someone because of who you think you were yesterday. That who you are today is who you are today. And if your companions say, wow, what's going on? You just be yourself. This is just the way that I am. This is it. This is it. Today, right? Who are you today? Who are you today? Who are you right now? Just to be yourself right now. Right now. It's only ever right now. Nothing else has any relevance. In the stillness, in the silence, the remembrance is here, and it's about this resonance of remembrance. The knowing that knows, just radiantly shining here now.